Okay, so welcome. I have an amazing guest with me here today, Angela Montoya, author of the YA fantasy debut Sinner's Isle. So thank you so much for joining me. Welcome.
Thank you. No, I'm so excited. Yes, I love this. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I recently just finished, so I think this will be like a really fun conversation because a lot of the details are still fresh on my mind, and I can't wait to dive into everything about this book.
Good. I'm so interested to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Little scared.
So, don't worry, all good thoughts, all good thoughts. So, to start off, I'm wondering if you can share what inspired your debut novel and
Yeah.
share a bit about the plot as well.
Yeah. So Sinner's Isle is a dual POV young adult romantasy, and it follows Rosalinda and Mariano. So Rosa is a majestic, which basically means she has magic inside of her. And because of that, she and other young women and women like her have been exiled to this tiny island. And the only way to get off is if they bind their power to a man of influence, which we really hate. We don't love that. And either does Rosa. And so she wants to escape. And so when she tries to escape, her plans get foiled. And that's where we meet Mariano. Mariano is the son of the pirate, basically the pirate king, and he finds himself marooned on Sinner's Isle. And basically, Rosa blackmails him in order to make him help her escape. And so that's like the basic idea of the story of the plot. Um, to be honest, the idea came sort of out of nowhere. It was one of those like weird moments. I had just wrote my first book and I'd queried the book and it didn't go anywhere. Like got close, but it wasn't quite there. And so I was in this weird limbo and I was just thinking, oh, I don't know. Like, do I try again? This is so hard. And I was in the shower one day and I just saw um this girl, this young woman in my mind, like being prepared for something. And she looked so angry and she had no control. And so I just started asking myself, like, who is she? Why is she like this? And and then in that same shower, I saw two kind of bedraggled, messy, scruffy young men stepping onto the shore of this like beautiful island, and they both looked mad as well. And so I just started playing with all these ideas, but I really knew sort of who those characters were right from that first shower. I knew who they were, and slowly as I kept asking myself questions about why and how, like slowly over time, Sinner's Isle formed into what it is today. But yeah, it took a long time for me to figure it out, to be honest.
Yeah, and along those same lines, like when you first got like that burst of inspiration, like did you already have like at least like a basic plot in mind, or did you see like change over time?
No, I had no clue when I first got that inspiration. Um, like I said, I just like wrote a book and it didn't really go anywhere. And I like kind of pantsed my way through that book. So I just wrote just with no goal in mind. And so for this one, when I started getting these ideas, I started, okay, I'm going to try and plot this out. And so I plotted out this entire story. I wrote this entire story. And when I finished, I realized it was all wrong. I had everything wrong about the setting and the characters. Not necessarily like the main characters, but sort of
Yeah.
the things happening around them. And so after I wrote that and I knew what I didn't want, I went back and rewrote Sinner's Isle completely.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was so messy. So messy. And yeah, it took me many rounds of revisions to get it like pretty much even readable. Yeah. I've changed. I've worked on my plotting skills and all of that, but that Sinner's Isle, I learned. I really cut my teeth with this book for sure.
And then next, I did want to dive into more of the story and like what happens. So, obviously a lot of it takes place on the main setting, Sinner's Isle, where Rosa is trying to escape, and then Mariano finds his way there. So I wanted to ask you, how did you sort of figure out the way that their stories interconnect?
Yeah, to be honest, like when I started with like Mariano in particular, I wanted to give him sort of like a voice before he gets to the island and before he even meets her, and her as well. Of course, they both go through these like separate things, and I did it on purpose. I really wanted to build their own storylines separately. So when they met, it made sense. And it wasn't just like, I mean, spoiler, it is a little insta lovey. But I didn't want it to be where it was just about the romance so much. I wanted it to really like dive in and understand these characters. And so I wanted to build Mariano's world out a little bit more and show him in his like natural habitat of being on a ship and what that looks like with his uncles, with his father, and sort of in my own way tackle like this idea of like machismo culture of just like what it is to be a man. And and so in his eyes he's seeing his father as men and or his uncles, and like this is what like real men are like. They're rough and they're rugged and they're uncaring. But slowly he breaks those sort of like stereotypical ideas of manhood apart, even with his friendship with Santiago. And so I wanted just to build these separate arcs. Yeah, and then they kind of mirror each other in many ways. So yeah, that's where his setting pretty much came from, just from me wanting to see some pirates.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that I loved that in the beginning. I feel like immediately as I was like in those first few chapters, I just loved how it was really clear that you were setting up their own perspectives and their own histories before you got them together. I
Thank you.
definitely
I
saw that,
appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it
Absolutely.
was, I mean, I know it was a choice because I know when you're looking at the cover and, it's them together. And so maybe for some people in their mind, it's just like, it's just going to be this swoony sort of like thing where it's just them all the time. But yeah, I really wanted it to be dig in a little bit deeper for the two of them.
Yeah, and I thought that was like one of my favorite parts because like the further you get into the story, like for me, I thought it was really about the characters, so I just thought it just made it even more fantastic and it adds like all these layers to like basically everything.
Yay. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, between the two of them, which was your favorite if you had to choose?
Oh, that's so fun. I feel like I there's like parts of each storyline that I love. Like I love the magic in Rosa's chapters, and like and her struggle, and how tough she is, and also very sort of sweet and kind of dealing with all of her crap. There was fun to write, but for me, like Mariano's were really fun because they had a lot of action in them, and plus they had Santiago, which is his like best buddy, and he's just so ridiculous, and he was really really fun to write. He's a fun character to dig into his brain a little bit. Yeah, I would say Mariano's.
Nice, yeah. And definitely I can see when I was reading his chapters, like there was a lot more like action, it was like quicker paced, and there was a lot of like funny moments. So I thought his
Yeah.
chapters were pretty fun too.
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just guys, just being out there, just
Causing
causing trouble.
trouble.
Yep.
And then next, I did want to talk about the setting and the world. So I loved that you like interwove a lot of different mythology
Hmm.
and just like folklore as well, and you just really make this setting like a very like obviously like just a very big like centerpiece of like how everything just works together in this story. So I wanted to pick your brain on that a little bit more and like see like what is it that you loved the most about bringing the setting to life, and just everything about Sinner's Isle?
Yeah, the setting was really fun to get to. Again, like when I first started, I didn't it wasn't going to be on an island. Like when I first got this idea, I dove into pirate history and like I just went on this deep dive of like the golden age of piracy, and it was so interesting. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to try and set this like in maybe like 1700s Mexico. And so I like did a deep dive into Mexican history and all of these things, and as I was trying to write it, it was hard because I'm not necessarily a historian. I love history. Like it's one of my favorite things to research is history, but I like quickly learned I wasn't going to do its justice if, in making it like a complete historical fantasy sort of
Right.
setting. So, so then, of course, as I was doing my research on pirates, of course, I had to watch Pirates of the Caribbean. So,
Yes.
um, so, and then I watched Black Sails. Like I was just in this world of pirate lore, and so of course I thought, well, it's got to be on an island. Of course, it's got to be sort of in this tropical setting in this world. And then slowly I started building it out. Okay, well, what's around this island? How does this world work? And so slowly I started building it into this island kingdom, and it was just like in and out of itself. We don't go beyond the borders of this island kingdom. We don't know what's beyond. And then I slowly just started picking apart what each separate island would look like, what it would be like, why are they part of this kingdom. And um and so a lot of that work was just done a lot for fun, but also because then I knew I could add it into the story as I went, like where different characters, what island they came from, and maybe that's why they act different ways, or have different mannerisms. And as far as the lore, of course, I had to add some sort of siren. You can't not have them if there's pirates around. And so I started doing research on sort of like Latin American lore when it comes to sirens. And I found the tlachanas, which are part of Mexican lore, and they're mostly freshwater, sort of like nymphs, magical creatures, but they have that same sort of like viciousness. And so I thought, oh yeah, we're going there. And so yeah, I was just like slowly just picking apart these different things that I really loved in my own culture, in my own world, and then adding them into the setting. And so it just becomes kind of like this fun treasure hunt of ideas, and feeling which one works and which one doesn't. Yeah, setting is fun.
Yeah, and then on the topic of writing, I'm actually trying to write too. I've been getting into it more recently, and I love that you
Yay!
said it's kind of like a treasure hunt. Like when you have an idea, it's like you go back and then are like maybe looking into different angles or different details, and like looking
Yeah.
into that more, figure out how it fits into the story.
Yes, I love that. I love that you're writing.
Yeah,
It's so hard, but it's so so fun.
absolutely. And then, actually, on the topic of history, since you had mentioned it before, what do you love researching?
Oh my gosh, any sort of history. I just love it. I think there's something so like magical about the past and how it echoes into our lives now. It's like you
Yeah,
you look at a building that's, falling apart, and you learn the history and you think, oh, okay, all of these different things, it all starts to click and make sense. And so it feels like a treasure hunt again. Maybe that's what it is. Like it
yeah.
just feels like every time, like my favorite show, and this is ridiculous, but it's Ghost Adventures.
Ooh,
But so they go to these haunted places, but it's not just them searching for ghosts. They go and they look into the history of these places and why they could be haunted, what sort of things happened there. and like I said, it like echoes into the present. And so storytelling feels so much like that. It feels like digging into history, because a lot of times with your characters, like, you have these characters that you're writing, and maybe they're doing certain things that readers don't understand why they're acting this way until they understand their history and their backstory. And oh, okay, now it makes sense why she makes so many poor decisions. It's because in her past, she learned she can't trust anybody, and so she's doing these things. So yeah, I feel like writing and history go hand in hand in a lot of ways, just because you can nerd out in so many amazing ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I'm kind of really into history too. I love watching like a lot of those like documentaries and stuff. I just
Yes.
love learning,
Yeah.
honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where this year in particular, I really wanted to make it a goal, like to be intentional about trying to be less on social media, and go back into the things I really love, which is just being a nerd and watching, those sort of shows.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's goals for sure.
And then next, I did want to dive into more of like the characters and the plot. So in Rosa's story, she is a majestic, so that means she has magical powers as well as the other girls and women on the island.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering if you could dive into that a little bit more and like the plot, and just like the conflict that she faces throughout the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. I wrote Sinner's Isle like late 2019 into 2020, and I can't remember exactly what was going on in that time frame, but I want to say there was some like women's rights issues that were stirring at that time, which they haven't gone away. It's constant. It's probably even worse at this point in our history. But I just felt like we have done so much as women in the States, like you know to be equal, or to have a say in our own bodies and what we do. And but still sometimes you feel so powerless over your own future, over your kids' future as a female. And when I first saw Rosa in my mind and I pictured her, and she looked so angry, and I think it was a reflection a lot of how I felt about the world. And I could tell, like, in her face, and as she was being prepared, that she was being prepared for something she didn't want. She had no say over it. She had no control over her body. And as I started formulating, like, okay, she's on this island. Why would these girls be on this island? And in my mind, I thought it's because they're powerful, and people don't like girls who are powerful. And so I just started playing with that. Okay, well, if they're powerful, what does that look like? Well, it's magic. And and so then I started playing, okay, well, what does the magic look like? Well, it's different for each girl. Each girl presents it in a different way. And so, like, again, I was just playing with these ideas and just adding my own sort of bitterness about the world into it. And so Rosa definitely, like, feels like in a lot of ways she was all of my anger and all of my like feminine rage put into this little body. And and it came out in these phantoms that could kill and destroy if she unleashed them. And so yeah, the that's how the magic came. And then I started playing around with, okay, well, if they're stuck on this island, is that it? Like, they're just stuck and they're trying to get out. And so I had to keep building. Well, no, they're on this island and people are coming. She's being prepared for something. What is this thing? And so that's when I came up with the offering, which was all of these powerful rulers of this kingdom were coming, and they were basically going to bid on these girls with magic. So yeah, I think I was just so mad at the world in that time. Still am. Nothing's changed. But I put it all in this story, and I wanted to see how these characters would sort of fight it out and figure it out. And yeah, and that's where all of it stemmed from, really.
Yeah, and then along those lines, I remember as I was reading it, I thought that was like such a present theme in the story, like feminism and just like the idea of like autonomy.
Yes.
And I just think you really, not only through Rosa's perspective, but I also think you got it through Mariano's perspective as well, as he like changes his views and his opinions.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I thought that was a really great part of the story as well, that you find a way to bring it together through the both of them.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was definitely it was a choice. And when I first wrote it, and I got into Pitch Wars, which is a mentorship program. And so we did some revisions, myself and my mentor. And then when I sold it to Joy Revolution, when I first sold it, the book was so much, it was darker and it was angrier, and they kind of came in and was like, well, we can have that, but what if we also brought in some hope and some joy into this story? So it changed a lot of who I was as well, because like in the midst of all of this terrible things that go on in this world, we can still reach for good and for love and hope and joy. And so so they helped me just as a human.
And then along the lines of Rosa's powers, like I know, in fantasy these days we see a lot of like guy characters with shadow powers, but I love that it was a girl. I
Yes.
love that so much.
Thank you. Yeah. It was
It's
funny
very
because
refreshing.
thank you. It was funny because I don't even think I meant to do it as like a reverse on the shadow daddy.
Yeah.
Because somebody asked me like, oh, well, you made a shadow mommy, and I said, oh, I guess I did. Yeah, I didn't even mean to like purposefully switch it, but I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, I love that. I thought it was really nice too because it also obviously is like a mirror into like her inner thoughts and her like inner feelings and everything.
Yeah.
So seeing it like get stronger and just seeing how she like grapples with it, I love that in the
Thank you.
story. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, it was
absolutely.
fun. It was fun to figure out.
And then as we get further into the plot, of course, there are like all these different factors that Rosa has to consider. She has to save her best friend, who is trapped somewhere, and she's trying to figure that out. And
Yeah.
then there's the Doña, who's like in charge of everything, and she also has her own plans in mind. Um, so my next question was, how did you like balance both of these different conflicts, and did you see them like change at any point in the story, or was it pretty much like the same?
Yeah, I think it was pretty much the same from the very beginning. And a lot of sort of like Donya's her history and her story actually parallels Rosa's, like when she was younger in in a sense. And so I wanted to play with that idea of like, well, what happens if you sort of lose the hope and you decide to play by sort of like the patriarchal rules? And that was Doña, whereas Rosa was still like full of hope and fighting to free herself and her friends, her friend. Um, yeah, it was a interesting dynamic, and I don't know if it was hard to balance so much, um but I feel like maybe have I had I maybe done it again, I maybe would have had even more time with Rosa and Mariano on there, because it feels like there was so much happening separately for them both that they didn't
Yeah.
actually get to see each other all that much until maybe the middle and later on, which which I didn't even realize. But I was so focused on Rosa's journey that and his, that like sometimes I was like, oh shoot, I should have brought them back together more. But yeah, each time I had like Doña on the page, I sort of loved it because she's sort of what any of us could be if we did lose faith and hope. You know what I mean? Like she's still out here trying to survive, and she thinks she's doing what is right for her and for her kind, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is. So yeah, just I don't know. I don't know how I balanced it, but it was fun trying.
I mean, I think you did a great job. I mean, I loved that. It's kind of like what you said. It's more about like that survival part of her character that sort of shows like all these different like layers to her. The Doña is like you get further along into the plot and everything, like what she's willing to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then along the way, of course, we have Mariano, who is marooned on the isle as well. He's just sort of like trying to figure out, you know, what to do and everything. So I was wondering if you could dive a little bit into his story as well and like what you loved about developing his plot alongside Rosa's.
Yeah. He's he's funny, I think. I mean, he's like such a dude in so many ways, and I really and truly wanted to show that you can still be this, quote unquote, like manly man, but also allow yourself to be soft and to listen and to comfort and to be comforted. And so each situation I put him through was sort of a new lesson for him in what how to and basically I was just trying to break down his walls so he could be the guy he always wanted to be, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
there's a scene where he has to dance with Rosa and he's never done it before. He might have wanted to, maybe it looked fun in his past, but because of his uncles and how he thought he was supposed to be this tough guy, he maybe didn't, and so now he has to do it, and so it breaks down his that barrier. And then with his friendship with Santiago, who's so free and open and like sort of like all over the place with his sexuality, and he's very just open about it and comfortable. And so that again is like Mariano has to learn to see that there's beauty in all sorts of loves, and part of that is like a bromance. It's like having this best friend that has your back and you have his, no matter what sort of ridiculous plans he has. And so I feel like each scene, what I was trying and hoping to do was basically let him just be himself and learn what that meant for him and be okay with it.
Yeah, because as I was reaching towards the end of the story, I saw like that big shift in his character, especially with how he thinks of the Majestics as well. Like he
Hmm.
just changes his perspective on so many things once he
Yeah.
reaches the end of the story.
Well, good. I'm glad it came across.
And then next, I did want to dive into more of like the themes that you had in the story. So you have, of course, these themes about like feminism and autonomy.
Yeah.
That comes through with like how the Majestics are just like a really big part of this world and just how they're perceived. Um, and then you also have like this bigger theme about like identity. I would say like that's what I got from it. These characters are trying to like find out like what makes them truly like themselves. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Nailed it 100%. I think, and like I said, I think a lot of it was just what I was sort of wrestling with in myself and in the world at large. And you know, I just wanted to feel powerful through this story, through these characters, because maybe at that time especially, like I didn't feel that way. And so getting to watch her come into her own power, um and be okay to let the world burn in many senses. I think especially like as women we're taught to be polite and to smile and to, be pretty and to, not cause a ruckus or whatever it is. And I wanted, and she grappled with it at first until she was like, no, I don't owe anybody anything. I owe myself and my friends everything. And so, coming into this space where she can just tear it all down and not care. And I loved that. I loved how she kind of let loose. Spoiler at the end. And yeah, so a lot of those themes were just themes I was exploring, honestly, like I said, in my own life and grappling with.
Yeah, and then just in general, I just loved how like from beginning to end, it's like you sort of sprinkle in all these like little like breadcrumbs, like I guess you could say, about like how everything just ties together, like the themes and just like the underlying like plot and everything. And also I love that it's a standalone. I would love to see more, but I also love that it's a standalone too, because I feel like we don't get that many all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a choice. Like I knew I could probably continue. I could, of course, there's so many characters like Santiago and King Sebastian. Like there's so many characters in this world that it would be fun to explore. But like when I talked with the team, Joy Revolution, it was kind of like, well, we feel like Rosa and Mariano's, story is good here. Like we came to a good ending for them. And so I was like, yeah, I think we're good. I think I could carry on, but I like where it ended for sure. I like that was it.
Yeah, and I think it's also really refreshing too, because especially like in YA fantasy, you're seeing like a lot of series or like duologies and stuff. So it's always fun to see a story that just wraps up its adventure in a single book.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It's a fun world, but like I said, I think their arcs they found the curve down. They
Yeah.
they were good. Tied it up in a bow.
Oh, and I hadn't mentioned this yet, but can we talk a little bit more about Santi and the king? I know we didn't really touch on them too much about their whole plots and everything.
Yeah, I love these two characters. I wanted, like, with Santi, I knew who he was from the very start. He was right there with Rosa and Mariano right when the first idea happened. I knew exactly who he was. I knew his backstory. I knew his family. I knew everything. And so he basically stayed the same sort of character throughout the entire every revision. He was always him. And again, I think it was because I knew his story and I understood that he is sort of so funny and ridiculous because he has so much trauma in his had so much trauma in his life and his backstory, that was sort of the only way he knew how to survive, was to just joke about things, to make light of things, like let's not get too deep, just let me have some rum and let's keep going. And so he was so fun. And then with the king, um, I understood him as well. As he was just this moody guy that he was inheriting this kingdom, and he sort of hated everything about how it was being run, in particular with the Majestics. And so he had come into the offering and figure out, okay, well, what is what, and what is true and what is not about what I've been told from my father's side and from my mother's side. So yeah, he was also grappling. And yeah, I think it was a really fun little connection that they found each other at the end. And originally, in my very first few drafts, they had always known each other somehow. Like they had hooked up, like, in the kingdom in the past. But that was one of the things that we cut early on with my editors. They were like, we've got enough happening. Like, we can cut some of these backstory situations. They can find each other, but let's trim it down a little. And I'm glad we did, because I had so many plot points that were just like pinging everywhere.
And then I actually also loved that you still left room for like a lot of surprises. So a plot point that really surprised me was that Santi was Rosa's brother. I was like
Yeah.
really surprised. I was like, but then when I look back, I'm like, you know what? It makes perfect sense, kind of.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's my favorite. It's my favorite moment of the whole book is that reveal.
yeah,
It's the thing that I get people in my DMs like screaming about often, and I'm always like, yes, yes, I did it. Um, because those sort of like twists are hard to pull off, because a lot of times you're like, oh, I've been knowing this. It's not that exciting. But I tried to plant the breadcrumbs like to be so like tiny little seedlings,
yeah,
that it wasn't, it was still a shock to many readers. So yeah, it was so fun.
yeah. And then
So
along
dramatic.
those lines, I something I notice a lot, and like especially like Latin American stories, is just like that thread of like family. So that's why I feel like I really connected with that at the end. I was like, it is just, you know what I mean? I
Yes. Yes.
feel like family's everything to us.
Yeah, 100%. And it was interesting to write this story, because there's not like a lot of family dynamics in the way of like in our lives, where families everywhere. And so I knew he had to get in there somehow and find her somehow. And so having her finally have like that family back, even though she has Juana and now
Yeah.
Mariano, but like to have her brother, um, yeah, it was beautiful. I was just so like touched. I have like two older brothers, three younger sisters, so you had to have some sibling action somewhere.
Yeah. And then I also liked that it was kind of also like a, like that thread of like, she can still hold on to like that past, that it's not like really gone from her, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that as well.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, I love history, and I think the past does, it bubbles up in so many ways. It changes us.
See, and then I did want to discuss, well, this isn't really a discussion, it's just more like a comment I had because I had so much fun with this book. Um,
Yes.
I loved that this was really just like like a story about the characters, and like just them figuring out who they are and what they want out
Hmm.
of life. I feel like I kind of needed a story like that right now, so that was something that I really took from it when I was
Thank
reading.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you. I appreciate that so much. Like the characters felt like family by the end of the story for me. Like I loved each and every one of them in so many different ways. So it means so much it means so much to hear that, to be honest.
absolutely. And then along those lines as well, I did want to chat a little bit more about like writing and just like in general, like YA fantasy and stuff like that. And you also do have your own writing podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah, I do. It's called Of the Publishing Persuasion. And it's just me and one of my best friends, Melanie Schubert. We met during Pitch Wars, which is a mentorship program we were both part of. And it was after Pitch Wars, we were kind of like, because it was such a intense, like full of energy mentorship program. Like it was so fast. It was like within 3 or 4 months, you had to revamp your book, and it was like showcase. So there's so much energy around it that when we finished, she was kind of like, "Gosh, I need something. I need something to keep going with this writing thing. Like I need something that gets me excited." And so she brought up the podcast, and we've been doing it now for two years probably now, and it's just a blast. We have on author friends, agents, editors, and we just chit chat about publishing and about books and all sorts of ridiculous things that probably we shouldn't talk about on a publishing podcast. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I want to ask you, since you've obviously hosted this writing podcast and you're an author as well, like what is something that you've learned on your journey that you can share with like aspiring writers as well who are wanting to dive into like YA fantasy?
Hmm. Well, as far as honestly, like the podcast goes, it has helped me so much because truly I'm very introverted, and before we started the podcast, like I'd been on Instagram and just having fun on there. Um, but to actually like do something like this 2 years ago, I would have been a hot mess, just sweating, like stomach hurting. I would have been so nervous. But because we started this podcast, I learned how to basically like be on camera and talk about my book and talk about other things like that. And I don't think authors have to do that, obviously. I don't think authors even have to be on social media. But I feel like you will be asked about your story. You will be asked to talk about writing stuff. And so if you can find a way to maybe not like get over your, nerves or anything like that, but find a way where you can communicate that comfortably, I think that's so helpful. Like I feel like when I read something, like I can't remember what it was, but it was like about manifesting your dreams, and one of the things was like, if you want to have a partner, you've got to build your space in your house to get ready for that partner. And I don't need a partner. I have one. But it clicked on me where I was like, oh, that's what I was doing with the podcast all along. Like I knew it was before I'd even sold my book. I knew eventually I wanted to be out here talking about my books. And so I started building my space so that I would be comfortable to do that, if that makes sense. And so, in a way, like I manifested like these sort of fun interviews, and so I think for authors or up and coming writers, as far as like these sort of things, like just slowly start building yourself and stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit by little bit, and in whatever fashion that means. It doesn't have to be like being on camera. It just could be anything. Like even if you're just chit-chatting with other authors on a Discord, that might be really uncomfortable, but if you slowly build yourself into it, you're going to build relationships. And so much of the writing world is community, is like knowing other authors, getting to chat with them about their experiences. They can offer you advice, things like that. So any way you can build a community, I think I think it's good for writers at all stages, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like as I'm more on like the blogging side, I've obviously like slowly over the years like learned more about like publishing and just like books and everything.
Yeah.
And I think this industry is like really unique because where others it's like it feels like very like solitary, everyone's on their own kind of. It's sort of the opposite here. Like you write your book on your own, but at the end of the day it's like it really is like a big community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And it's like very blurred too,
Yeah.
where it's like the reader and the author were all sort of blended and blurred together. And so yeah, like we met whenever, what was it, Sinner's Isle, the cover reveal, I think, is when maybe we first started chatting in Twitter or X.
Thanks.
And yeah, and so it's like things like that, like these
Yeah.
little connections that slowly build throughout the years. And then I get to come on here and chat with you. So it's like
Yeah.
all of these things are just these moments that, yeah, we can have. And like you said, it's such a the writing world is so vast, but also very small. And
Yes.
it's a really strange. I don't think there's any industry maybe like this, um, maybe besides maybe acting or something. But it's so vast, and yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and then along the lines as well about like writing in community and everything, um, what would you say has been like a highlight for you, just being a part of this community? If there's like anything specific or just like a fond memory that you have?
Yeah, I there's
So many.
so many fun moments. Like to me, my favorite has been like going to the different book festivals. I've been to just three, but that like before that I had been to none, so I'm really pumped about that. But I got to go to Y'all Fest, which was my first ever like book convention conference thing, and it was the coolest, most fun event I've ever been to. I did not know what to expect over at Y'all Fest, but the first day I got there, I was just walking to go grab coffee and somebody yelled my name. And at first I was like looking the other way, like, well, who else is Angela Montoya here? Like where is it? You know, like I had no idea that anybody would even like know me. But then someone just came and I got to sign my very first like book, and so it was so beautiful. And someone brought me a candle that they had made about like a sinner's aisle candle, and like there's
That's
all
so
these
cool.
little things that you dream about when you start writing, like, oh, somebody's going to read my words and they're going to like it enough that they might want to just say hi. You know, all like it was coming true finally when I went to my first book conference, and then I got to go to Love Y'all in Georgia and Atlanta, and that was another one. It was all romance readers and writers, so it was young adult and adult this time, and that was really fun to get to like mingle with adult authors and just kind of BS about the industry and chit chat about romance. And then when I got to go to Y'all West, I got to meet you in person, and like though it's those moments that are so special. I would think for every author, it's because you work so hard and it is so solitary in so many ways. So when you get to go out and actually hug people that have been supporting you or that have read your work, it's I don't think there's anything more special than that. It was yeah, I would happily go to any like festival. Anybody wants me to go, like let's make it work. They're so fun. It's really cool. It's like an author dream. I speak for all authors. No, but no, it's special, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just like connecting with the people who like read your work and take the time to like really just enjoy it or buy it or gift it to someone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. The support that readers show authors is so beautiful. It's like nothing else because I think books are just so special. You know, it's like whenever I just reread like Laini Taylor's series, or I'm currently rereading it, and if I ever saw Laini Taylor, I would find a way to like get down on my knees and say thank you. Like there's just something about a special book, you know, those books that just touch your soul. And yeah, so I just love readers. Readers are well because I was a reader first, so of course I love them because we're just great.
And then I did want to also dive a little bit into, I guess, just like this is more like something I guess we could both relate to, like just the joy of seeing more like Latina authored stories.
Yes.
So like whenever I see a new one, it makes me so happy, especially as like an aspiring writer,
Yes.
because we all have like these different experiences that just aren't being represented in publishing right now, and there's just so many like different cultures within our community, so many like different, just so many different stories to share. You know.
Yes. No, there can't be enough. I feel like especially in fantasy because I feel like culturally we're it's not even fantasy, but it's ingrained like magic
Yeah.
and lore. It's so ingrained in everything that we understand about the world And so every single time I've read like a fantasy book written by like a Latina author, I'm always like, oh, it just gives me chills because they just dig a little deeper or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. It's just so, so beautiful. And I love the covers that I've been seeing that are coming out. So yes, more and more every single time. We need it.
absolutely. And I did want to ask you for you, like, what was the first like Latin authored novel that you ever read?
Ooh, I feel like it would probably be Zoraida Cordova's. I'm, I'm I'm trying to like go back in my brain, but I feel like she
Oh,
was,
her first series, or
yeah,
the
the Bruja. Do I have them down here? I don't know.
Labyrinth, the Labyrinth.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I gobbled those. I love the covers. I love everything about it. And so she was like, when I first started writing, I was just like, I just kept my eyes on Zoraida. I was like, oh man, she's such a badass. Oh, sorry. She's so cool. She's so great. And so yeah, she was my go-to. She still is. She still is.
Yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think those were maybe the first like Latin authored books I'd read too. Either her or Anna Marie McElroy.
Mm.
Yeah, who
Hmm.
writes awesome magical realism.
Yes. Yeah. No, they're killing it. They're so good. So yeah, she's
Um,
great.
and then I know we are getting a bit close to an hour, so a couple more questions, then we can wrap it up.
Okay.
Um, so next, I did want to ask you for any like Latin writers out there, Latin aspiring authors, what advice would you give to them about their work or just about publishing in general? Any advice you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I think honestly, just do it and don't hold yourself back and all the words that you want to use and all the language you want to use. Like, don't hold yourself back. Just do it and embrace it. And I honestly remember when I first started writing the first book that I mentioned that went nowhere. It was full on, like I had all my diverse cast, my Latina cast. I was like in the trenches, but it wasn't going anywhere. And I had somebody, like an ex friend, say, "Well, why don't you just change the characters and just make them white? We know it sells. Why don't you just do that?" And it never ever crossed my mind, and it was never even an option. But the fact that people do think that way, you know, it is sort of a gut punch because
Yeah.
there is truth to it in the fact that we don't see enough of our stories on the page. And yeah, my advice would be to say f you to all people that think that way, and just continue on and continue to fight for your stories because we do need them.
Well, that is amazing advice. So, if any fellow writers end up catching this, thank you. Thank you for that. And then I did want to ask you about your upcoming book because there's obviously more amazing stories coming from you later this
Yeah.
year. It is A Cruel Thirst, which is a YA vampire like fantasy, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes. Could you share anything and everything about it?
yes, I love the story. It's so fun. It's just like a fun, wild romp. And this one has those family dynamics, for sure. When like we first started kind of figuring out what I wanted to do next, because my contract was for two books, Sinner's Isle and then another book, which wasn't going to be, another part of the Sinner's Isle world. It was going to be something different. And so I was like brainstorming with my team, like, okay, well, what are we thinking? I had ideas, and none of the ideas I had was really working. And then one of my publishers, David Yoon, was like, "Well, do you have anything like with vampires?" And I thought, "Oh, yeah, like." I don't have any ideas, but I'm going to come up with one. You better believe it. And so I immediately just started thinking, okay, vampires, like and then I started thinking like, okay, well, what's some of my favorite movies that just like inspire me that I just loved. And I just recently watched The Mask of Zorro. I love how ridiculous it was. And so I thought, oh, okay, vampires like in the West, vampires in like 18 like 1840s, 1830s, well, California, which it would have back then would have been, part of the Mexican
Yeah,
Empire.
yeah.
And so I just started building all these ideas. Okay, well then how does this vampire come to be? And so again, I was just building out all these stories, but eventually we came to A Cruel Thirst, which is about a poor Lalo Villalobos who has recently been turned into a vampire, and he's terrible at it. He hates it. It's not like this glamorous, broody, like swoony vampire story that we think about when it comes to vampires. Like, he's not that guy.
Mhm.
And so he wants to turn himself back. He wants to find a way to either reverse what was done to him or rid the world of vampires, because the vampires that turned him are now after him. And so he finds himself in this tiny pueblo, where he believes like vampires originated from. And his idea is like, okay, I'm going to find the original vampire and I'm going to get rid of them. Instead, he bumps right into Carolina, who is a wannabe vampire hunter. And so her goal is, I'm gonna kill this guy to prove to my family that I can hunt vampires, just as good as the boys. And so they don't get along very well at first, because he's trying to live and she's trying to kill him. But of course, there's some swoony romance that happens along the way, and they learn that they can actually work together to end the world of evil. And so, yeah, it's full of hijinks and all kinds of ridiculous scenes. And yeah, it was really, really fun to write.
I cannot wait. It sounds like such a fun time. And I can't wait for a Latino vampire story. I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah. No, this one was fun to figure out the lore. It was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and the cover, every time I look at the cover, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
They
So
hooked me
gorgeous.
up. They hooked me up. That's for sure.
So gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Just the colors and everything.
Oh, thank you.
So
Yeah, they
beautiful.
killed it, honestly. It was better than anything I could have ever dreamed of or imagined. They nailed it.
And I wanted to ask you, is this one dual POV as well?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. So we're getting both Lalo and Carolina's point of views, and they both are equally ridiculous. That's fun.
Cannot wait. And then actually, we
Yeah.
do have another question here. I'll see if I can put it on. When you first envision stories, do you see your scenes, images, colors, or do you imagine it already like written out?
Oh, that's a cool question. Um, I see them like a movie. I literally will see them as a like film playing in my head, and then I just try and write down what I see in that scene. So I just love movies and television so much. um like when people ask what my hobbies are, that's my hobby, is movies and TV. So I see it all, just scenes coming. So yeah, that's how I envision it, and then I try and just mock that with my words and hope it makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the cover's good, right? The cover's good.
And then, oh, I always love asking authors this question. Um, if your book characters could meet any other book characters, who would you want them to meet?
Oh my gosh. I think it'd be fun if the crew from Sinner's Isle met the crew from A Cruel Thirst. I think they would have a heck of a time. Yeah, I think there could be some good stories to share between each other.
Love it.
Yeah.
And let's see. So to wrap up, since I know we're already close to an hour already, any other things you'd like to share? Any other projects you're working on? Anything else going on that readers should be updated about?
Yeah, I have. I'm going to be part of an anthology coming out with Al Crate, which is called Monsters in Masquerade. I don't know much about like how it's being like produced or published, but that's something that's going to be coming out later on in the year, which is really fun. And I do have something else in the works. Nothing's announced yet, but it's going to be another young adult romantasy in the future, with another full Latina cast.
Exciting.
Yeah, I'm pumped, honestly.
And where can readers find you if they want to keep updated on all of your books?
Yeah, they can find me. My website is angelamontoyawrites.com. And then I'm on Instagram and TikTok, Angela Montoya _author. Those are the main places you'll find me for sure.
All right, so then now we have reached a little over an hour. So I just want to say thank you so much to Angela for joining me for this fun chat, chatting spoilers and everything about your book. And hopefully we will have another chat soon. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you.
Yay.